Red Hill werewolf of Hagerstown. Hmm, okay. There are many other precedents for such connections between historic events and the appearance of strange animals. One example that occurred in the early 1980s was sent to me a few years ago by a resident of Hagerstown, Maryland. He wrote, "Growing up, my father always told me stories of the werewolf of Red Hill. My dad and his friends, since I was a small child, have sworn they used to see what looked like a werewolf on this mountain they call Red Hill because the clay is red. They have a story that they went looking for it in the daylight and they came across some caves and they got rope and flashlights and a gun and went to explore the caves. Inside, they found all kinds of Indian drawings, and in some areas, you had to squeeze through narrow passages to climb up ledges. This is where things grew spooky. As the men, and I will say good because we're about to enjoy, as the men continued climbing the ledges, something unknown shot out of the rock crevices and grabbed the man's uncle's wrist. Ooh. He managed to break free, and the pair hastily left the caves. The writer added, "My dad and his friends aren't the type to lie about things like this. They have a good many incidents that occurred with this thing. This area is very historical and a lot of battles have taken place. So there's a lot of supernatural happenings around this town." Yeah, but this should exclude still ghosts because ghosts don't take physical forms. So this is something different, right? I checked
Mhm.
around and could not find a specific reference to the Red Hill werewolf. So it may be just a localized legend that would require some on site deep digging and interviews to document properly. I did, however, discover there is an old graveyard. Man, it's always Indians, it's always graveyards, it's always
Right?
like there's a pattern in all these different stories. There's like
Yeah.
tree hopping abilities, silence in the woods. It's
Yeah,
like I can see a pattern.
for sure.
So he says, I did, however, discover there is an old graveyard known as the Red Hill Cemetery near the site of a church on Red Hill Road. Again, we find here the cemetery werewolf combination. That's interesting. Although it must be admitted that country cemeteries are not rare, and older ones that are not maintained make fine hiding places for all types of wildlife. Okay, pause. Dane, why do you think that cemeteries would be connected with werewolves if werewolves exist? Cemeteries are just, I mean, not even corpses. Unless there's a fresh corpse, it's usually just skeletons or maybe not
Mhm.
even that. So it will be ashes. So so werewolves, if they would exist, or dogman, they will not digging and eating these bones or ashes, whatnot. So there must
Yeah.
be something other. So let's say it's not cannibalism. Let's say they're not looking for food. In your
Yeah.
just in your logic, in your thinking, what would be that any of anything that is evil, any entity that will be drawn to cemetery? I mean, yes, we know that cemeteries represent death, but still, what is it about this place that werewolves or dogmen would be attracted to? Like, why?
Yeah, I don't know. The first thing that comes to my mind is just that association with death.
Mm,
Um, kind of the whole vulture thing. Vultures, any desert, if the ancient Israelites, um, sent Azazel, the scapegoat, out into the wilderness, sent him um, back to the demon, right, and where he belonged, and they put their sins on him and sent the sins out to the back to the demon where they belonged. And then there's other passages about desert creatures that are associated with death, and you mentioned earlier the associations with death. So I think there's something with that. An association with death versus an association with life. You mentioned the creatures and the teeming forest and the beauty, versus the destruction and the silence and the fear, all associated with death. So I think there's something there. And then the other thing that came to my mind was the Anubis god, Egyptian god thing. I don't know like what the Anubis god represented, but I have some. I'm sure it had something to do with the afterlife. So I want to say that something about guarding, something about guiding the dead after their die to the underworld. And you know, a cemetery in Wisconsin or wherever is going to have people who were probably Lutherans. You know, not like this isn't ancient Egypt, so that's why that doesn't really make sense to me in some ways. But yet, uh, you can see some of the clues there and the parallels there too. What do you think?
Honestly, I don't know. That's why I ask you. And the next thing that bugs me even more is if this werewolf is supposedly the same werewolf that his dad saw, and now his son is seeing or witnessing, and
Mm-hmm.
this was 50 years ago. I
Mm-hmm.
have so many questions. If it's the same werewolf, how come he didn't age or die?
Yeah.
Could it be something that is occultic or magical about this being that is, again, not just a furry creature, which, like all the animals, would age and eventually lose energy, strength, and get sickly and die? So this is
Mm-hmm.
still very active, very alive, very, very strong being. So let's say it's the same werewolf. Like, how long does it live? Can it reproduce? With whom if it's only one werewolf? Um,
Mm-hmm.
in the case of giants, they say that they were usually males. Like, are there female dogmen and female werewolves? Um,
There are some stories in here of female dogmen I noticed.
okay, see,
Yeah.
I don't know much about this, so I have questions like if it's this is the same werewolf, how come he lives so long and it's still so strong? And like, just like is there must be something occultic, something forbidden, something evil, something impure, something magical that keeps it alive all these years, all these decades,
Yeah.
and it's still so much energetic and alive, and it's like it won't stop, like unless you kill it, like it will continue existing. So it
Yeah.
just makes me think it's a symbiosis. It's a both like a spiritual entity and physical entity, or spiritual entity that chooses to manifest in
Mm-hmm.
flesh, just the same thing like the angels were doing
Mm-hmm.
throughout the Bible, or so, or even like the fallen ones in Genesis 6, and after that. So it seems like, you know, they all these spiritual beings have the ability to manifest in flesh when they want to.
Yeah. Which
I
was
have
what we would
more.
call
Yeah.
preternatural. Yeah. Preternatural beings versus supernatural beings. A couple things came to my mind while you were talking. One is the whole idea that demons, uh, the reason demons seek to possess people is because they were once alive, right? So if you go by the view that demons are the spirits of the dead Nephilim, or the Nephilim, for anyone who hasn't heard this, are the offspring of the angels who rebelled in First Enoch and in Genesis 6. They descended off Mount Hermon, and they saw beautiful women, human women, and they took them and they had babies, and the babies were giants, and they call them Nephilim. So the Nephilim died, and their spirits remained on the earth, and because they're a fusion of angel and flesh, they desire to have a body, and that's why they seek to possess humans. Well, a cemetery, what's a cemetery full of? Bodies. You know, so that's one thing that kind of, I don't know if there's a correlation there or not, but that popped into my head. Um, and then I forgot my other point. Maybe I'll think of it. But yeah, no, there's definitely patterns. You know, it's just like nothing quite. You can't quite connect all the dots, but there's definitely patterns.
Mm. Okay, I'll continue my story because it's almost over. The connection in
Okay.
the Maryland legends between historic battles, hidden Native American rock art, old cemeteries, and the Red Hill werewolf makes me wonder again about the true nature of the wolf like creatures Brad saw in Michigan. In both cases, the creatures appear to be flesh, fur, and blood animals, but many Native American sources believe certain animals may have a dual nature. This is so
There you
funny.
go.
We just talked about this, and I didn't even read this part before. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay. The concept of
your
spirit
prophet.
guardians. Oh, this is what you said about Anubis. The concept of spirit guardians keeping watch over burials is common in Native American beliefs and goes beyond the idea of an avenging spirit animal.
Hmm.
So, if some of these wolf like creatures had or have dual nature, and if some of these have tasks to be guardian uh, entities, maybe, just maybe, that's why they're not so aggressive towards people, but just
Hmm.
give them the look, warn them, and left.
Hmm.
And maybe other type of wolf-like creatures are more aggressive. Maybe they
Hmm.
have different um, jobs, positions, duties, in this structure. It makes sense because the Satan in his kingdom has a structure, humans have a structure, God has structure. So
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think we're getting little by little more details, and I think this is very cool. Okay.
I think that's, yeah. There's definitely something to the structure comments you're making. Yeah.
Mm. Um, okay, and it goes beyond the avenging spirit animal, right? The Native American belief, as was the case with the witchy wolf discussed earlier. Other beliefs include spirit entities that can travel between worlds to appear completely solid and physical. Again, this is like angels and fallen angels in the Old Testament.
Hmm. Yeah.
Completely spectral or something in between. These would be different from the shapeshifters. See, they do have, I mean, if this is true, who knows? But they do
Yeah.
have different kinds of these entities.
Hmm.
So this would be different from the shapeshifters said to use ritual magic to go from human to animal as described above. If true, and of course there is no way to prove the ability to hop between worlds with our present science, it would provide another explanation as to how the creature seemed to be traveling through the trees and also the non canine appearance of the long arms and hands. Man, imagine, I know I'm getting crazy with my ideas, but imagine if um, we humans would be able to capture one of these beings and somehow to communicate with it and capture it, and if scientists would be able to access its mind and communicate, and if it whatever it is would yield and reveal secrets, how much we would gain knowledge, but also what of that will be also secret knowledge that God would not want us to have. I'm just thinking,
Yeah.
like, I know it's a lot of sci-fi and fantasy, and I'm okay with it because I love both theology and sci-fi. But how much would it be like, wow, like we learned this and this and this from investigating this being? I'm just,
Well, it's, I mean,
yeah,
it's, I don't think it's not a new idea, right? I mean, that's exactly what the Jewish people believed about the Watchers and the giants, that they taught them. There's a list of things they taught them in First Enoch, right? Metallurgy and magic and how to make up and
makeup, yeah.
beauty and other
Mm.
things. So, yeah, I think it's actually plausible if you take that view. If and like for myself, I don't know if I accept that as historical truth or if I view it as more God's accommodation to ancient Jewish beliefs. But I'm open to it as being plausible as well. So then why couldn't something like that be here? And I'm sure it's happened. I mean, you've probably heard the stories about uh, government programs, kind of like we talked about earlier, trying to use occult ritual to communicate with the other side or do remote viewing or possibly contact entities and get knowledge. So I think this stuff does happen, or at least I do think people are crazy enough to attempt it. And I say crazy enough because uh there's a reason God, like, prohibited the Israelites from practicing divination and stuff like that and talking to the dead. It's because we don't know who we're talking to. It could be, we don't know, like, if what its intentions are, if it's and we have every reason to believe that the intentions are not good. Um, so
That reminds me of the stories of numerous exorcists. Some of them stay away from getting too personal with demons once when they perform exorcism, but some of them like
okay.
to engage in dialogues with demons when they're still possessing someone. So they like to communicate and ask questions. And for me, this is so naive. This exorcist priest, pastors, doesn't matter who. They actually would believe when they ask a demon possessed human, when they ask a demon, what's your name? What's your agenda? Tell us this, tell us this,
Right.
tell us this. And they write it down as if the demon, how do you know it's speaking the truth? Well, if we ask it in the name of Jesus, you might speak truth. I'm like, okay, I understand, I get it, but how can
Yeah.
you rely on what you get? That's amen and true 100%. Like, I don't know how people can and then out of what they get as
Mhm.
the answer, sometimes they change or alter their spiritual warfare tactics to accommodate to the next cases when people are demonically possessed. And they even
Okay.
write books, and they can offer these tools. And I'm thinking, but how can you rely on this? Like, how can you know that this demonic entity is telling you the truth? You're not Jesus, that it was, the demonic creature would be shaking and it has to speak the truth, but Jesus
Hmm.
also knows what is true or not. You don't know, you're just a human. So I think that
Yeah.
sometimes people exaggerate what is their authority and ability in Christ. Just because we have different
Yeah.
authorities God Jesus gave us, we're not superhumans. Like, I think sometimes people can get more, their beliefs can be more sci-fi than our beliefs who actually love sci-fi. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's a tempting thing. I interviewed a ghost hunter one time, and ex ghost hunter, I guess. But one of the things he said is he started out ghost hunting with this idea that he was going to approach it more from a scientific perspective. And as a Christian, he didn't think there was anything wrong with that. And I'm not saying if you're Christian you can't ghost hunt, but as far as his experience, for him personally, he felt himself giving up some of his convictions as he went along out of curiosity, out of communicating through EVPs and things like that with spirits, to the point where um, he maybe started to accept and believe some things that he would normally not have as a Christian, because he kind of got sucked into it. And I
Yeah.
think there's something to that. Like, even with this cryptid stuff, um, I think it's important to look at it and investigate it and talk about it and try to understand it. But I also think, like with a lot of things, right? There's a temptation, or there's a kind of a little bit of a danger in sliding too far down the path sometimes. And that's not to say I wouldn't be one to say, oh, avoid out of fear, because I don't think we should be fearful when we have Jesus. But yeah, we also have to be smart, I think, and about it too. I just kind of feel like, kind of to your point, it's like easy to get sucked in, I guess, right? And then before you know it, you're sucked in too far.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. I only have small paragraph left, and then it's your turn. The alternative to the shapeshifter and realm hopper models is the possibility that a physical breeding group of bipedal canines live in the western edge of the Manistee National Forest. Other sightings bear out that possibility, and most witnesses are adamant that they saw fully physical beings. The conjecture continues.
Yeah. To me, the angels taking on flesh idea is definitely a connection here.